It is the 18th day of January 2024. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Dana Durnford. Hope you're doing well. Always takes me a couple of minutes to get up to smashing speed. You can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. Consider subscribing. Do some clicking while you're at it. We got lots of dirty, disgusting nuclear to get after. We got... we're going to cover the earthquake in Japan 18 days ago. People are still abandoned, no food, no water. The Americans are now flying 2 flights a day. That should help 100,000 people out. Always takes me a minute to get into the madness. Speaking of madness, the video last night's video, was 2 hours, 3 minutes, 9 seconds. And 12 hours later, it was 2 hours, 1 minute, and 26 seconds. We lost an hour, a minute, and 40 seconds. So what did he chop out of my video? So it's very important you watch my video in the first 12 hours. Because after 12 hours, they're going to make the video longer, typically. This time they chopped out an hour or a minute and 40 seconds. I'm going to do a little recap of last night because they chopped out a minute and 40 seconds. And I don't know. I'm going to record this one as we're doing the live show tonight. And so we have a copy. And then if they chop out any minutes on the weekend, I can go through the video and figure out what they chopped out. And you can't download my video, I noticed, until 12 hours later. Comments don't show up for 12 hours. So they announced yesterday there's 20,000 homes have been completely destroyed. 20,000 homes. And so up to that point, they're only acknowledging 1,400 homes. There's probably 30,000 homes that are damaged, but at least 20,000 were completely destroyed. So you would expect the number to be a lot bigger than that, actually, for damaged, right? Central Japan quake caused no problems with the local plant. And this is going back a little bit further. So they said they had the earthquake at the Shika nuclear power plant was an upper 5 on Japan's maximum seismic intensity Shindu scale of 7. Beneath the number 1 reactor, not the number 2 reactor, not anywhere else on the site, but beneath the number 1 reactor. It's such a strange statement, see? So were they trying to tell us the number 1 fuel pool's melted down? I don't know. There was a question. The poll tonight is, would the International Atomic Energy Agency / United Nations try to hide another nuclear fuel pool's meltdowns like they did at Fukushima reactor 3 and 4? They actually hid the nuclear meltdown at reactor 3 and 4 in Japan. And so that's reactor 3, that's reactor 4. The fuel pools would be about 120 feet above these stumps. There was no reason to leave the stumps there. But what they done was built this cover over it and then pretended that they were in the fuel pools. The United Nations is now claiming it didn't even happen. And so if you voted yes on the poll, then you voted appropriately. and you voted appropriately. Yeah, we'll get there. We're getting there. So there's a lot of good stories last night. I'm just going to jump right into the news cycle after this one here, actually, because we've got a lot to get through. Fukushima nuclear plant operator had no safety concerns about the earthquake. They said there was cracks underground now at the Shika plant. That's the first time I heard that. TEPCO says that the integrity of all the Fukushima reactor buildings, the integrity of all these buildings that has no integrity whatsoever anymore, even in the potential case of a quake 1.5 times as powerful as the one that struck on March 11th, which was a 9.1, wouldn't cause any integrity loss in these fragile stumps. So, like, this industry is insane. They're actually insane. And there's no lie too big for the media to tell you. Of course, heart attacks is the rate of heart attacks post Fukushima was stunning, and deaths by heart attack would give most people the creeps. Let's just jump past all of that, jump into today's headlines. And there was one more story yesterday I want to touch for 1 second. They were talking about using lasers to clean up space debris on decommissioned space satellites and that. And so they show a picture of a laser from Japan hitting the satellite, but all you're going to do is create trillions of little pieces that are traveling at 17,500 miles per hour. Either one of these pieces at that speed hitting a countering satellite will tear it apart. Okay, so there's two stories from a number of days back that I didn't cover, so I'm going to cover them tonight at the very beginning of it. This one, and then the other one is about robots, humanoid robots. And it's a very important story, and I can't seem to get to it, so it's going front and center tonight. Then we're going to jump into the earthquake news. TEPCO to analyze seawater samples around the Fukushima plant once a week when the discharge is not underway. So they're claiming that they've never discharged anything from these buildings. Nothing has ever got out of those buildings. Is there anybody out there gullible enough to believe that? Like, there's nobody in the nuclear industry who's going to believe it. Everybody in the nuclear industry, every nuclear scientist on the planet knows the reactor core and the fuel pool's gone. But the average person does not. They got a new game, Fallout England, to a post-apocalyptic version of England's capital city, which is present. That's an apocalyptic scenario there now, right? With all the invaders they imported in there. You got more media saying Axe Hong Kong Japanese seafood ban based on data. The only data that they don't want, no one's willing to acknowledge, is that these buildings are Reactor 3 and Reactor 4 at Fukushima are actually gone. And at the top of each building was 2 decades of reactor cores. At the top of each of the buildings. So there's around 10 reactors. And each reactor is about 100 Chernobyls. So there's 1,000 Chernobyls in each building of uranium plutonium dispersed worldwide. It's the animosity equivalent of 2,000, but there's actually 4 of these reactors. So there's 4,000 Chernobyls. And we're still not doing it justice because Reactor 3 was a mixed oxide fuel, a MOX fuel reactor. So robots. Oh, to be a robot. On Sugar Mountain with the barkers and the color balloons. James Lucid is talking about the graphics on that opening picture, the thumbnail. That's not it. What the hell did I do with that? I got no idea what I got done with that now. I got no idea. Just bear with me 1 second. We're just going to jump into the earthquake right after we cover these robots coming up in a second. Oh, that one right there. I did hit it. This was the Americans bringing relief. Now, they made 2 helicopter trips in after 18 days. Japan wouldn't let anybody else go into the peninsula, the Noto Peninsula. And they didn't even let their own self-defense forces fly in there, particularly avoided the Shika nuclear power plant. So let's just talk about these robots for a minute. 10 years ago, DARPA, robotic challenge trial event near Miami. And I watched the most advanced robots ever built. This is 10 years ago. Struggle their way through a scenario inspired by the Fukushima nuclear disaster. Inspired by... first off, no electronics can survive in a disaster. So after the DRC ended in 2015 with several of the robots successfully completing the entire final scenario, the obvious question was, when would humanoid robots make the transition from research projects to a commercial product? The answer seems to be 2024, when a handful of well-funded companies will be deploying humanoid robots in commercial pilot projects to figure out whether humanoids are really ready to get to work. And they're going to be standing around 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighing in at around 140 pounds, 65 kilograms, and can lift around 16 kilograms and 35 pounds all day long, 24 hours a day. There are currently several million people working at tote handling tasks, and logistic companies are having trouble keeping positions filled because in some markets there's simply not enough workers available. And the work tends to be dull, repetitive, stressful in the body. So they're trying to justify replacing people with robots. Robots to look for in 2024 are these three. But 2024 is basically the beginning now of the humanoid robot onslaught. Agility is not yet ready to provide pricing information for Digit, but we're told it costs less than $250,000 per unit. So if Digit is able to achieve Agility's goal of 20,000 working hours, 5 years of 2 shifts of work per day, it brings the hourly rate of the robot to $12.50. So imagine when the robot comes down to $10,000 each. And it can do mechanics and carpentry and cooking and waitressing, and it can do everything. Taxi driving, of course, that's going to be auto driving. Amazon's experiment warehouse robots. Did you want to be lonely at Amazon? The company currently has more than 750,000 robots deployed across its warehouses. So Amazon has 750,000 robots. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. So a new factory now can build thousands of humanoids a year, and a full scale over 10,000 robots will be built in Oregon annually, but it won't be long before the robots can build themselves. At peak capacity, the RoboFed will employ 500 humans, working alongside a bunch of digit robots to train them so they can get rid of humans, and be able to produce 10,000 robots per year. But eventually they'll be able to produce themselves, right? So the world's first humanoid robot factory is announced for 2024 of bipedal robots, walking robots, and they're not alone. At least 7 other companies are working towards the goal with hundreds of millions of dollars of funding. And a Unitree H1 humanoid robots, the Tesla bot, building machines that think like people, look like people is just around the corner. They can do it, but they don't want to spook everybody and turn them against the industry, right? They want to assimilate the robots in and then give them human features and then make them look exactly like humans. But don't worry, they got plans to make sure you don't complain. So Boston Dynamic, I believe this was, don't quote me. I figured it's the first of its kind AI robotic company bringing a general purpose. Well, they're not general purpose when they cost $250,000. Apollo, general purpose humanoid robots, 5'8", 160 pounds, can run 4 hours per battery pack. So suggesting you just pull out a battery pack and stick in another battery pack, right? Can be mounted to any mobility platform, stationary or fully mobile with legs. And the LEDs, and look at that face on it, and the head, mouth, and chest all working together to communicate. Start charging, so you can see on the body, you can see the face, the mouth now got a battery indicator. Hello, I'm Charlie 4. Calm down, Charlie 4. And the battery life, hot swappable battery packs with a 4-hour runtime. So they'll have 2 batteries. So you can take one out, the robot's still functioning, and pop in another battery. And so then they can just have robots going around swapping out batteries and other robots. But eventually it'll climb the telephone pole and just charge itself in 3 or 4 minutes. One robot, endless possibilities, delivering Amazon to your door. You know that's coming in the next few years. Well, that'll show up in about 4 to 5 years, I would imagine. Work cell delivery, machine tending, pallets. And then they start dressing them so you can't really notice the body. And then they just put simulated human skin on it. And at least 7 other companies are working towards the goal with hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. Okay, so I just want to touch on all these robots because they're building these factories to make humanoid robots to take over so-called menial jobs. Most of the people that are doing the menial jobs don't have the skills to do other jobs, and so they're getting displaced. What's going to happen to them? Yeah, who knows? Nothing another pandemic can't fix, I suppose. In their eyes, anyway. So, innovative method for removing radioactive cesium from the wastewater after Fukushima nuclear disaster, wastewater. So the theory is, the official story and the theory is that this never happened. And that everything that did get out is in 1,000 tanks. and that the tanks are filtering everything, and so nothing whatsoever is getting out except for tritium. And I've never seen a model of tritium, for instance. But that was the official story for a couple of years now. As of last year. So this model over here is NOAA's model of cesium-137, iodine-131. We have tons of these models. None of them are tritium. Not a single one is tritium. Innovative method of removing radioactive cesium. This is a no-go zone around the Fukushima nuclear power plants. And the yellow spots are spots that they removed restrictions on. So the red is a nuclear wasteland. They call it a no-go zone, but nuclear wasteland. Everybody else on the planet calls them nuclear wastelands. And that's the reason nobody lives there, because they're nuclear wastelands. And you can notice up there in the top buddy's house up there where they allegedly decontaminated a little section of a nuclear wasteland, and their people are allowed to go into their homes. Now, if you go in there, you're a very disciplined slave. You can't cross the street or hang out in the garden and stuff like that. And so the recent comprehensive review published in Frontiers Environmental Science and Engineers on the 5th of December, researchers from another scumbag university in the removal of radioactive cesium from wastewater. So think about this building and think about all the isotopes. So the majority of the isotopes are plutonium, neptunium, strontium, diiodines, cesium, americium, and there's about 1,000 fission products you got to worry about. But each one of them got multiple daughters that you got to worry about. And so plutonium 228, 238, 239, 240, 241 are the exact same size as cesium. And so when you got a nuclear meltdown, so you can put 200 million atoms, for instance, on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. So it's so small, you can't filter 200 million atoms. So how are you going to filter 100,000 cesium out of that pile that's invisible to the naked eye? Because you can't, right? You got to keep everything. You have to contain everything. You can't filter that kind of stuff. And the reason they're using the word cesium is because that's the propaganda for 80 years, is cesium. Special attention is given to methods employed in the cleanup efforts following Fukushima, notably the Kurian, the Siri system. These are both supposed to be cesium-137 filters. And desalination systems, I got no concept of what I'm about that. And the Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, which in 2014 wasn't used and still didn't work. And Stephen Young. Stephen, look up the universalantidote.com. The Advanced Liquid Processing Systems, ALPS, given cesium's unique properties such as a small hydrated radius and high diffusion coefficient, these methods face significant challenges in effectively isolating cesium ions from water. So this is quite the fable that they're going to filter cesium out of the water and then everything is somehow magically okay. Let me just touch on that for a minute. Hi, everybody. Horsehaven, Albert, Dana Nasana, Stephen Young, James Lucid, Thinker, Richard. Hi, everybody. Port Angeles. I'm just scrolling up. Conrad, John Cranshaw. Hi, John. Albert Collette. Sue Sprain. Hi, everybody. James Box. Charles Sands. Yeah, nice crew there tonight. Here we go. Keep going here. So just because we're going to jump into earthquake stuff in a minute. But let me touch on the ALP system at Fukushima, because it's so important, because they're just going to... I clicked on the wrong one. Here we go. We'll get it. We'll get there in a moment. We're almost there. The industry is crazy, isn't it? 1200. Short version, is that it? Yeah, let's try that. So the water filtration system, there's a whole bunch of things going on. So let me try to just touch on some of it for you. The ALP system, so April 21st, 2014, the Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, has yet to function reliably. That's 2014. But there was also the REVA system, which is 2014, 6 months later. So that's 3.5 years. And the ALP system 3 years later still didn't work. It doesn't work because you can't filter radiation. You can't even walk over the pipes from the tanks. If the tanks were full of stuff from the reactor, you couldn't walk over those hoses or just alongside of them. It would be a lethal dose. And the tanks would be 1.4 million sieverts of just beta, which means even if the tank was 6 feet thick lead, it still couldn't shield you. And you couldn't get back on the site if you filled up a tank. And so the ALPS, the REVA system was the same as the ALPS system. And it was the French system. And for the last 3.5 years, the system's been unused and kept out of operation. Unused. And they can't even dismantle it or dispose of it because they turned it on once. It was so radioactive they can't get near it again. They had July 2014, they were going to build a bypass operation. They were going to pump water that was coming down the mountain, and rather than going through the site, they were going to block it off and pump the water around it out into the ocean. That didn't work. They were going to build a fence for $1 billion, and it's going to stop the radiation from getting in the ocean, which is ludicrous to suggest that you could do something like this. And why would you even try it? Because the buildings are actually gone. But see, all of what I'm showing you, the ALP system, the REVA system, the fences, the pumping system, was all meant to draw you away from the facts that the buildings were long gone. The ice wall, which is the most bizarre story on top of all the other bizarre stories, typical, the ice wall operations are not meeting expectation. But why would you build an ice wall when you can build a real wall? What's the point of that? Why not build a real wall that you don't have to keep frozen and spend $12 million a year on? The Siri system and the Korean system, we never heard about them after 2013. They went silent. The plant had already released enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from the plutonium leaks from the reactor buildings. After the water passed through the crippled units, it was processed through the Siri system to remove the cesium. This is just... The tanks were built so that you wouldn't look and you wouldn't think about the melted reactors. That's why the tanks are built. The tanks were built so you wouldn't look and see something like that. Because the minute you sees that, you realize there can't be anything in the tanks because everything was gone by day 6. Let me see. Let's get back into the recent news. Conditions deteriorate for survivors of Noto earthquake in Japan. Which is such a strange statement, isn't it? I suppose it's not. In the nearly 3 weeks since a devastating 7.6 magnitude earthquake struck central Japan, tens of thousands of survivors remain in perilous conditions, displaced and lacking access to basic necessities like running water or, water. Rain and snow have made it difficult for rescuers searching for the victims, but they had 5 days before the rain and the snow came through. And they refused to let the Americans, the Chinese, the Indians, many, many other countries want to send in search and rescue teams to specialize it because, everybody knows worldwide you got 72-hour window. And that 72-hour window, there was nobody went in there. We assume it's because the Shika nuclear power plant fuel pools have melted down. Approximately 19,000 remain evacuation centers, while others have moved to hotels or are staying with family members. They got 24,000 homes outside the area for the victims, which suggests they lost 24,000 homes. I showed you at the beginning that they admitted yesterday to 20,000 homes. It took them 17 days to admit that. We don't know where these 17,000 homes are to, or 20,000 homes are. And that why is 24,000 families moving out? That they're paying for the rent for the next 2 years for. Many evacuation centers continue to lack basic supplies, including water and food. Well, that's quite the hint. Why don't they have water and food 18 days later? How is this possible? How did we ever get to this? How can we not have water and food 18 days later? In a country that has got 1,000 earthquakes a year. We've never seen anything like it. The only thing that makes sense is if the fuel pools melted down. The nursing homes, which were already experiencing labor shortage before the quake, in many cases now incapable of providing adequate care for the residents. And the central government plans to dispatch approximately 1,700 care workers to the region by the end of February, in 5 weeks' time. They've already been abandoned for 3 weeks. They don't have any water. They don't have any food. What's going on? I've never seen anything like this before. I never heard tell of a scenario like this before. Even a third world country has a better response than Japan. However, the labor shortage is nationwide, and many facilities around the country cannot send personnel. We'll send in the military. He also stated there was little hope of the water supply being restored to the hospital anytime soon. And many of the staff were unable to reach the hospital, and a significant amount of medical equipment has been damaged. And yet they got no help. 18 days later, 55,000 homes are without running water. You got any idea what kind of hell that is? Or toilet paper. I doubt if they got any toilet paper after the first week. Basic services may not return until March. A little over 2 months. Good luck on that. An official from Suzu, remember Suzu, where they went silent after 3 days. They never mentioned the damage again. The mayor said for the first couple of days they got almost every building, every house is destroyed, and which is at least 90% were completely destroyed, which was 4,500 homes. And they never mentioned that again. So now all of a sudden, for the first time since, an official from Suzu, one of the hardest hit cities, stated that a full recovery. And remember those pictures of the tsunami where big boats are washed up. That's actually Suzu. Stated that a full recovery will take even longer, and we faced a daunting task of redoing the entire area for both water and sewer. Now, I talked about this a lot over the last week in particular, right? They're going to just have to redo everything, and there's many, many other earthquakes expected in the near future that could be larger than the one they just had. And it'll probably take years to fully restore the system in Suzu. So Suzu, why did they hide the fact that that town was destroyed for the majority of the 18 days? Because the first 2 days there was reports, right? But there was a lot of reports coming out. But whenever they quoted the mayor of Suzu, he said every building there wasn't a building left standing normal, and 90% of it was flattened. And they had the tsunami ran in there on top of that. Yet avoidable problems began almost immediately after the earthquake, and many of the evacuees were cut off from help, with shelters lacking elementary safety provisions like radios to contact rescuers. In a country that has 1,000 earthquakes a year, none of this makes any sense. Many makeshift centers also lacked heating as temperatures dropped to freezing levels. How come they couldn't find heaters? Like, don't they have a whole bunch of RVs and stuff like that where they could have put the most vulnerable people in the RVs with some heat? Don't they have generators in Japan? None of it makes any sense, does it? None of it makes no sense. And then when you put them in a big school auditorium, even if you got heat, the heat goes straight up. It's like the worst case scenario in the winter to put someone in a school with no electricity, because there's no way you can get heat in there. And if there's no heat there, they're going to be freezing, right? Because they're so big. And little has changed since then, because like if you got a small ceiling and a lot of people there, the body heat will heat up the room. Little has changed since then, with the Kishida government taking only minimal steps to address the crisis. That's quite the statement. Only minimal steps to address the crisis. And that's 100% true, because we've covered it, which blows my mind. We've been covering this for 18 days. I can't even wrap my mind around that statement. The only reason we're covering it for 18 days, my heart goes out to the victims, but we generally cover nuclear. And there's a nuclear power plant called Shika. And we're worried sick the Shika, at least reactor 1 and fuel pools, which is about 10 reactor cores, have melted down. I apologize for not turning the microphone down again. A little sloppy on my last show of the week. Little has changed since then, with the Kishida government taking only minimal steps to address the crisis. This included so far allocating just 31 million US in emergency funds to support the evacuees, which is a pittance compared to the amount supplied to the military. Just 37 or 57 billion or something, is it? So they gave NATO just last week or something 37 million. NATO, which is in a proxy war with Russia and Ukraine, right? So instead of NATO fighting Russia, they got Ukraine doing it. But they located for 2024 $54 billion for the military. Maybe I got that wrong. And disaster budget was cut to its lowest level since 1986. So here's the U.S. forces on the ground. Thank goodness. Calling Chubu. And I don't know what's in the background. I don't know what they got in those boxes. I don't know what Chubu is. James got some funny comments on it. So U.S. forces, a U.S. military helicopter flew twice on the day between the self-defense forces air base in Ishikawa city of Komatsu and the Noto airport in Wajima, another city in the prefecture. And Wajima, of course, was wrecked. That's where they had the big fire. And so the self-defense force members received the boxes of supplies at the airport, and they're going to diddle them out to the evacuation centers. This is one of the strangest pictures I've ever seen. Like, you got tens of thousands of people to feed, and this is aid. 18 days later, it's humiliating. Fear grows of disease outbreaks at evacuation centers because they're abandoned. They don't have water. They don't got food. The high school volunteers are collecting whatever water they can find in buckets to flush toilets. Must be hellish, eh? Water shortages continue in almost all areas across 6 cities and towns. So there's only one reason that I can come up with that all these people have been abandoned for 18 days is if you had a nuclear meltdown at the Shika nuclear power plant. And in Shika City, they said it's a 7 out of a 7 on Japan's seismic intensity earthquake scale, followed by immediately by major earthquakes for 18 days later. Quake hit Vietnamese and Japanese rescued by compatriots. So they're taking care of their own, bless their hearts. At least they're taking care of something, because the government's not doing nothing. So they traveled 12 hours to go 100 kilometers, basically. And the fastest they can get was 20 kilometers an hour. Their cars fell into potholes, so-called potholes, and got stuck many times. These are not potholes. This is the earth is cracked wide open from a 4,000-year-old fault that finally snapped. And he felt aftershocks continuously throughout the journey. It took him 12 hours to finally reach the destination. There's around 5,000 Vietnamese out on that peninsula alone. They said mobile communications mostly restored in Japan's quake-hit area. Well, that's not true. They admit that coming up here in a minute. Communications continue to be disrupted in mountain areas, as coastal areas like Wajima and Suzu. The earthquake registered a maximum of 7 on the Japanese seismic intensity scale of 7. Caused about 8,400 base stations to stop working. They lost power everywhere too. Green laver seaweed harvest peaks in Fukushima, Soma city. And Soma is a nuclear wasteland. It's unbelievable amount of nuclear fallout in Soma city. Used to be one of the country's top producers of seaweed. But after Fukushima, they stopped shipping products. They were resumed in 2018, but it's just 15% of the pre-nuclear meltdown levels. Still enough to kill a lot of people, I guess. They're going to export to Europe in November for the first time since Fukushima. And local farmers want to expand their market to Asia and elsewhere because they don't know any better and they've been brainwashed by the scumbag universities. He says it retains the refreshing smell of the sea. When I go out in the ocean for the last 12 years, I don't smell the ocean anymore. And we can't find the species. Oh, I had a story here. Honda says they're going to be producing these electric and hydrogen powered cars. Again, you'd be pretty gullible to believe them. Fukushima citizens raised voices about their ongoing pain while building their own new society. The real meaning of recovery. Well, Fukushima can't recover. Like, first off, they picked up 60 million one-ton bags in Fukushima. Just try wrapping your mind around that statement. 60 million one-ton bags. It's so crazy. It's such a crazy story. Let me see if I can kind of articulate how insane the story actually is with some pictures. So this is a picture I took from Japan's mainstream media chastising people for suggesting that the farmer's food is radioactive. The farmer is in a nuclear wasteland where nobody lives, surrounded by millions of one-ton bags of radiation, and they're harvesting food. And that's not the only picture from the mainstream media where you see that happening. Like, if this was a Hollywood movie, it would flop because nobody would believe that's possible. No one would ever do that, Dana. No, except for the Japanese and the nuclear industry. And everything you see under the tarps there is tarps are over the one-ton bags. So underneath the tarps, that's what it looked like. But this picture really does kind of give you... There's 105,000 sites like that in 2019. 105,000 sites. That's a nuclear wasteland. So how are you going to rebuild and recover in a nuclear wasteland where they're going to poison you at your supermarkets and your restaurants and your hotels, where they're pretending nothing got out, only 2.2 grams of tritium, but they refuse to acknowledge they picked up 30 million one-ton bags, and that the minimum amount for the bags was 100,000 atoms per kilogram. And there's 1,000 kilograms in each of these bags. Like, the numbers we're talking about are stunning. So they're talking about a safe place for the young people to escape the local radiated environment. There's so many horror stories about this. I'm not going to take you through it tonight, but there's so many horror stories. They say 300 cases of thyroid gland cancer diagnosed in young people by 2022. It's actually 13,646 out of 38,000 in 2012. And pre-Fukushima is 1 in a million. It's 1 in a million. So why are these people still there? Because your universities and your government hate your guts is probably the only way you can really put it. They actually hate your guts. Extension help post-quake recovery. I'm talking about the bullet train. Oh, there's a little section there where the bullet train can still run. Like, you can run outside the prefecture, but it can't run in the prefecture. Generator fails in a test at Japan's Shika nuclear power plant. So this picture allegedly was taken by the Manichi helicopter on January the 2nd. And so apparently that helicopter, that's the only picture it took. It never took another picture. And that picture showed up everywhere. It was taken by the media helicopter. The helicopter didn't take any other pictures. And I've scoured through their paper on a number of days, and I can't find another picture from the helicopter. But that picture showed up in all the media, and that's the official picture of January the 2nd, and there's no damage. See, Dan, there's no damage, so stop talking about it, Dan, move on. But, like, why is all the media showing us this picture? Because if a helicopter flew over it, where's the pictures of Shika City, for instance? Where's the reports from Shika City? There was one media went there, but the pictures were looking at the top of the buildings from down low. You couldn't see anything under those stacks and outline at the top of some buildings. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. So obviously they weren't there. This was a picture previously where they just cropped the top part of the picture. Hit by a series of problems in the wake of Noto earthquake, peninsula earthquake. So the time by one of the diesel generators is stopped. And it circulates seawater to cool the nuclear fuel stored at the plant in the town of Shika when external power is lost. And from what I seen was that coastline extended out 820 feet, which meant the pumps were out of the water. Ready to lift it up, or rather, not extend it out, but it kind of looks like it extended out, but 820 kilometers of the coastline lifted up, and that's new coastline. But that extends through the nuclear power plant too. There's a good possibility that plant is wrecked. Now they covered up Fukushima nuclear meltdowns, and everybody let them off with it. And so now they've grown more bold and more brazen and more lethal against humanity. I'm going to play this clip. This is the media claiming that they're in the fuel pool of reactor 4 to the left, which would be 120 feet above the stump you see there.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly rated
So
radioactive fuel rods.
it froze up on me, did it? I had no idea what's going on there. So bear with me.
Inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
Yeah, I got no idea what's going on. Let's keep going. So here they are pretending they're in a building, rather. Pretending they're in a building that don't exist. Do you think they won't do that at Shika too? And then they got all this hooey-wooey. The seismic intensity of the Japanese January the 1st Noto Peninsula earthquake registered an upper 5 on the 7-point Japanese scale on the grounds. That's the first time we heard that narrative of the nuclear plant. Now, they were saying it was in the basement of the number 1 reactor. That was the Japan Times. The basement of the number 1 reactor. Let me see if I can find that. Because that's such a crazy story, right? Oh, I can probably find it. Just give me a minute. Shika. I'm in the right spot. Yep, there she rolls. So the Japan Times, you can see at the top the Japan Times. That's the story. You can go read it yourself. And they do it twice in the story. So according to the company that owns the plant, the quake measured an upper 5 on the Japanese seismic intensity scale at the basement of the number 1 reactor building. The basement of the number 1 reactor building of a Shika nuclear power plant, Ishikawa Prefecture. And then they also put it in here. Like, you can't just have an earthquake in the basement. It has to be the other. It can't be just reactor 1. And so we're back to that other story, an upper 5 on the 7-point scale in the grounds of the, which is today's story. Because transformers to malfunction, rendering 2 to 5 external power lines unusable. Well, there is no power. It didn't matter if they're unusable, there is no power. electricity continues to be supplied through the remaining lines. But how is that true when Shika got no power, nobody else got any power? How can a nuclear power plant have power? Nobody on the peninsula had power. Still don't. On January 16, another quake measuring a lower 5 in the Japanese seismic intensity scale hit the town of Shika. And see, so it's very confusing when you hear that narrative. Right? It's very confusing for people. Let me do this. So lower 5, so you got to take 10 and divide it by 7, which is the Japanese scale, get the Richter scale, which is 1.428. So a lower 5 is 5.5. 5. Oh. 0.5 times 1.428 is 7.8. So 7.8 in the same town, which had, it was a 7 on a 7, which is a 10 out of a 10 on a Richter scale. And the company has not identified the cause of the automatic shutdown. The possibility of human error is low. Of course, the industry doesn't even know it's supposed to be a human, I don't think. So let's go back to January 11. Japan quake stressed the nuclear plant beyond the design limit. And again, we see that picture. The aerial photo shows the Shika nuclear power plant and Ishikawa Prefecture on January 2nd, 2024, and the Minichi, or whatever you pronounce it. So why doesn't we see any more pictures of that site or in that community? Only that one picture. That's the helicopter only took one picture. And the quake registered a maximum 7 on the country's seismic intensity scale in Shika, which is quake registered a maximum 7, a 7 out of a 7, which means you can't stand up, for instance. So the whole town should be basically flattened. You can't flatten that whole town without flattening the nuclear power plant. Real-time radiation levels not been monitored at some locations near the Shika plant. Yeah, they come out and said 16 of the Geiger counters within a couple of kilometers were offline. And I'm sure they're telling the truth, because that's probably the only time they told the truth in their lives. The fault responsible, this was January the 3rd. I just wanted to do a little recap here to articulate the Shika. So fault responsible for the recent Japanese quake may stretch 150 kilometers. So 150 kilometers had done this. Shika town looked like that, apparently. And likely to continue for the time being. It registered the highest level of 7 on Japanese seismic intensity scale, which is 7. In the prefectural town of Shika. And this was January the 3rd, where they admitted that. And its vicinity has since experienced strong aftershocks, which is Shika they're talking about, including quakes measuring an upper 5, which is a 7 point on the Richter scale. Footage shows the extent of the Noto earthquake damage. Aerial footage of Ishikawa Prefecture's Suzu city. So the pictures we're going to see is very bad quality, of course, but it's Suzu city. And so this was somebody in a car. They came to a stop when the original earthquake struck, and you'll see the trees start shaking. You'll see snow coming off this house, and you're going to see this building collapse. And look, you can see the snow coming down at that time. Now more snow. And you got the other angle, that's the building over right there, collapsing. And that island was destroyed, which used to be called Battleship Island. Well, it ain't a battleship anymore. Look at that. So it went from there. Let me see if I find a better picture. That's a pretty good picture there. It went from there to that. Crazy, eh? And that on the other side of it. But then when you look at the community, you can see incredible damage. But look at how bad the quality is. Why is it the first footage we're getting out of there is horrific quality? The mayor said there's literally no houses left standing. Everything was either destroyed or damaged severely. And Suzu City is also where those boats, we showed that earlier in this, since the earthquake, like day 3 or 4 and 5, and that we were showing these pictures. But not these air pictures, which are a drone with the worst camera quality in human history. You can't distinguish literally nothing out of the pile back there. Do you think that's an accident? That they gave you such a low quality for the first footage? So Wajima, which had a couple of hundred homes and businesses burnt to the ground, 1,000-year-old district, right, is now gone. The Magna creator, known for his work of Cutie Honey, and Devilman. It's got a wide range, eh? This was a story from today, but they're talking about a pet toy poodle, bless his little heart, was rescued on January the 4th. So 3 days later. And the owner, I think, was 90 years old or something. And that's what that team does. They specialize in rescuing pets. And then they bring the pets to be with the owners, and that gives them some hope, right? 9-year-old toy poodle. After someone heard a faint bark responding to their calls from inside the house. And almost 72 hours had passed since the tremor. This was an earthquake, not a tremor. And for the first 8-10 days, that's the only word we saw. Well, that's a lie. We did see earthquake, but the majority of the time they referred to it as a tremor. Pretty rare they refer to it as an earthquake. He said, I hope that by saving as many lives of pets as possible will give the owners affected by the tremor. So how did everybody know to call it a tremor? Does anybody really think she called it a tremor, or do you think she called it an earthquake? And this was an Osaka news story. So the media was, and we showed this in the first 5, 6, 7 days, that this was a coordinated effort to downplay this earthquake. And the only reason you would do it is because something catastrophic happened, like a nuclear meltdown at the fuel pools at the Shika plant. Nippon.com, the 10th anniversary event, communicating Japan to the world. They haven't lied to you either bit at all. They were founded in November 2011 following Fukushima, which was in March of that year. Public broadcaster NHK strongly called, and we covered that story because that was one of the original stories, called for viewers to evacuate during the quake, and the aim was to break the normalcy of the bias. So normally, the host of these medias, they're very, very soft-spoken. Some of them might even call them retarded. But they had decided that there was another major tsunami. They were going to talk harshly to people and tell them to run as fast as they can to the hills, right? And so they're being credited now with being heroes because they yelled at everybody and told them to go. Your lives are the most important thing, he said very loudly, repeating, calling for people to evacuate very harshly. Because in 2011, they didn't do it, and a lot of people died. And the NHK staff members involved in the coverage felt they could have done more. It's hard to believe that they're honest. So the broadcast included calling out loudly using an imperative tone of voice, such as saying "run away" in a commanding manner, might resolve the issue. And NHK thought having anchor persons use a strong tone of voice as opposed to the usual calm voice could give viewers a sense of urgency. And that's the problem with news, is they use this calm voice all the time. Instead of like getting people upset about, their country being co-opted, they just lull them into complacency by always using this soothing voice. According to the NHK's Public Relations Department, aka scumbags, when will the next plant come online in the United States? No one knows. Nobody knows. We're only allowed Shika quality pictures. Good comment. I know Finnegan called in last night. He was very upset. One of his comments worries me. We never had a chance, but Dana has the platform. You can't call what I got a platform. What do I got here? I got 45 people. That's quite the platform. He should be calling for violent revolution if he believes the scientific data he shares. For a violent revolution. Yeah, YouTube will take me down in a drop of a hat, like they done the last time. Right? I can't do it because YouTube will take me down. And he apologized, but like when you call in and you scream and curse on my show, then YouTube has an excuse then to take it down. And there's 1 minute and 40 seconds missing out of my video last night. That's not missing. When will the next nuclear plant come online in the United States? No one knows. It's a joke, right? When will the next plant come online in the United States? Like the one they got coming online now is taking 30 years or something. The last project to actually come online took 30 years was Wastewater 2, I think it is? Reactor 2, I can't remember. It was 30-something years. I can't remember off the top of my head. I shouldn't say anything. I know this is over 30 years. NewScale went through a deep round of layoffs this month, and its future as a going concern is uncertain. So they're talking about when will the next nuclear reactor come online. Well, it's not going to be in small-scale nuclear small modular reactors. They don't even exist. Why are we even talking about them? Geothermal actually exists. Hydrogen exists. Why are we talking about geothermal, though? 6 of the United Kingdom's 9 nuclear reactors are offline for maintenance or something, with plans to retire more this decade. Just in the next couple of years, they expect a lot of them to be offline, don't they? Except for 1 or 2. The majority of the UK's nuclear reactors are lying dormant. And look at this, surrounded by farms. Meaning about 58% of the country's nuclear capacity is going unused. These are death machines. 6 of the reactors are offline for maintenance, according to the Nuclear Industry Association. And they're the last people I believe anything from is the United Kingdom Nuclear Association. They're literally degenerates. And they don't even build their own reactors. They're incompetent rather. The EDF, which is French government on top of that, is the operator, said expected 4 reactors be back online by February. That don't mean it'll be online, though. The French got as much credibility as a cockroach. It could take years for new nuclear plants to come online after budget hikes and delays. Years. Try 15 years. Small modular reactors complete Canadian design review milestone. Yeah, but just because they got a design review don't mean they got an application into the regulatory agency for a plant. There's no fundamental barriers to licensing the Z100, XE100, which is the atomic symbol for xenon. It's a nasty isotope. X-Energy Reactor Company has announced. And while the design is still evolving, in other words, it doesn't exist. Like the money that they're grabbing is, and they're getting these investors. They're on the stock market with no reactors, and the stock market is letting them out, robbing the investors. It's like a free for all, eh? When it comes to nuclear, nuclear can do anything except for build reactors. Aye. Let's keep it rolling here. We're getting there. India is going to commission a nuclear power reactor every year. Does anybody actually believe that one? India is going to commission a nuclear power plant every single year. Sure, they don't have the land. They don't have the water resources. They don't have the infrastructure, the equipment. They don't have the manpower. The 80% energy sector consists of fuel that is being directly used as molecules or as a reducing agent. The industry is insane. These reactors are among the best reactors in the 700 megawatt category, with many safety features have been included in them, and they claim that it should be capable of containing the releases, a meltdown if there's any. You can't contain a meltdown. It's burned through the containment at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. There's nothing can contain it. Ontario Power Generation's wasted time exploring French reactors. Ontario Power Generation wasted time exploring... Well, the French can't even build reactors, and why is Canadian looking... Like, anything's better than the CANDU reactors? This is a French reactor. All French reactors are surrounded by farms as far as you can see, by the way. Ontario's largest power company is exploring the possibility of importing nuclear reactors from France. France can't even... Who's going to build them? France can't even build reactors in the United Kingdom and Finland and China. Nonetheless, that the first decade of this century, Ontario provincial government started planning to build 2 more reactors at the Darlington site. But those plans were abandoned after sticker shocks. The Atomic Energy of Canada Limited bid was a staggering $26 billion for 2 reactors. $26 billion. 3 times the government's proposed estimate. So, like, whatever the original bid is, you can expect that to triple too. And that would be $36 billion in today's dollars, which Canada's money is not worth nothing anyway. But around the world, 234 nuclear reactor projects have been suspended or abandoned, and many of them had billions spent on them before they abandoned them. And you know, we covered a story yesterday, wind and sun failed Alberta in the winter. Well, here's another one saying wind and sun helped the system through the power crunch. Lying. That's about the only thing they're good at, isn't it? A non-proliferation solution using anti-neutrinos, and I talked about this yesterday, bizarrely. It was quite bizarre to see that story show up today. I think that was from yesterday, actually. We didn't cover it. I didn't see it yesterday, obviously. Just let me see if I can find out one about neutrinos here from the Canadian reactors. Oh, I think I spotted it. There you go. I did spot it. I just got to grab everything. So the basic story, let me go back one page. So, a ghostly glow of a nuclear power station detected in pure water 150 miles away. So 150 miles away, they have pure water. It's buried under a kilometer of rock in Ontario, Canada. And a tank of the purest water flashed as barely detectable antineutrinos slammed through its molecules. So the antineutrinos, 150 miles away from a nuclear power plant, are going through a mile of rock. 150 miles away is more than a mile of rock. It's a mile of rock deep, 150 miles away. And they can still read the antineutrinos. So, like, if you live at the surface within 100 miles of a nuclear power plant, they're doing sex ratio studies on you because there's more males being born than females because they're polluted heavily with radioactive fallout from these disease factories. But the particles slammed, known as antineutrinos, originated in a nuclear reactor 240 kilometers, 150 miles away. That's incredible. These things shouldn't exist. That's evidence these things shouldn't exist. I'm not worried about the antineutrinos as much as I'm worried about the 1,000 fission products. My apologies. Me apologies. Thirsty. A non-proliferation solution using antineutrinos to surveil nuclear reactors. So this is a Japanese scientist who's coming out and saying he's discovered a way to find out if reactors are online without going near it by looking for antineutrinos. But as I just showed you, that was done by Canadians last year already. An elusive elementary particle that is generated abundantly during nuclear fission, the antineutrinos. So anybody who lives within 100 or 1,000 miles of a nuclear power plant are being poisoned. Lawmakers advocates raised questions about changes to the Seabrook Nuclear Station Emergency Plan. The Seabrook. Remember a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago? They put out a recording. There's beaches there too, and they told everybody to run away as quick as they could because of an accident. And they come out and then said there was no accident and that it never happened, but there was videos because people got cell phones, right? So then they come out and said, well, the recording was accidentally played and the sirens were accidentally activated. But the whole thing is there's a huge protocol. It takes a whole lot of people before you can actually play the recording or the sirens. A whole lot of people got to go acquiesce to it. You can't just, no single person has access to that chain of command. If the world understood how evil this industry actually is, you'd go to war every day like me. The Non-Regulatory Commission, also known as Nuclear Regulatory Commission, requires nuclear power plants to have an emergency preparedness procedure that will effectively protect the public if necessary. Will effectively protect the public. Nuclear couldn't care less about you. And I mean that honestly, right? A plant's existing procedures can exceed the standards, so a reduction in effectiveness will continue to effectively protect the public. So they're talking about scaling back monitoring and all kinds of other stuff. And they're saying the existing procedures can exceed the standards. So to reduce it still exceeds the standards that they should have. Cannot result in an effective plan. Of course it can. It's absurd to suggest it can. Downwind from nuclear testing, Idaho seeks compensation. Such a sad story. And she's one of the people leading the charge. For 2 decades, Tona Henderson collected newspaper articles, letters, photographs, documenting the people in the small town of Emerald, Idaho, that were diagnosed with cancers. Now, cancer is just one of many, many other diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that'll devastate your families and your communities, including her own family. The result is a wall in her home covered in pictures, pages displaying the names of community members who may have been exposed to lethal radiation during the nuclear war they call nuclear weapons testing. There was a nuclear war, right? Same weapons. But you should do a study on heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. And then you should be looking seriously at Alzheimer's, dementia, and autism, diabetes, and Down syndrome, and schizophrenia. All of these will manifest from nuclear contamination quite soon. Some of the first studies they're going to do after a nuclear accident is Down syndrome and autism. She's been a leading advocate for the federal government to provide financial compensation to Idaho victims impacted by what nuclear testing, which is the nuclear war, same weapons, and they just nuked themselves, right? Which sent radiated clouds beyond Nevada's boundaries to other neighboring states, including Idaho. I got some of these models there, the old models of the radioactive fault. Let me see if I can find them. Anything's possible. Anything's possible. Anything is possible. Come on, except for finding maps. Come on, Dana, find a map, damn it. Nuclear fault map? Could that be one? Yeah. Oh, that's not the one. This one. This one. So this is a model of at least 2 or more radioactive clouds. Each one of the lines, there had to be at least 2 radioactive clouds that had the same pattern. So everybody in the United States theoretically should be covered, should get compensation for the nuclear testing, right? Future nuclear success requires regulation modernization. So they want to get rid of any checks and balances for the small modular reactors, particularly the mixed oxide fuel reactors. But the mixed oxide fuel are the most lethal things in human history. From a multilateral agreement to triple global nuclear energy production at the Constipated Party 28, Conference of Parties rather, 28, to the powering of a dormant reactor worldwide, and the powering on of dormant reactors worldwide. And this is a phenomenon we've never seen before, where in desperation to keep the nuclear industry relevant, they're trying to light up old reactors that are closed because they're brittle and they're 40 years old or 50 years old. And so what happens is the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the alpha rays, the gamma shines, the X-rays have compromised the integrity of all the infrastructure. And so when they decommission a nuclear plant, 90% of it is nuclear waste because of that particular issue of the neutron bombardments and everything else. And these reactors are very high pressure. So they're 1,000 psi to 2,200 psi. So if you got, that's the containment. So when that's brittle and you're putting, you can see where this can go wrong in a hurry. And how many of these accidents do you need to destroy a country? Oh, that's right, just one. To contaminate the entire country and the rest of the continent. And so Constipated Parties 28 said they want to triple the reactor on the planet by 2050. By 2050. So let's go over to our big shot screen. Hi, everybody. You'll like this. Oh, to be triple. So there's currently 413 reactors. So let's multiply that by 2. So you got triple what you got right now. It's 826. And they're going to do that by 2050. So we're going to divide that by 26 years, right? By 26. So that means each year they got to build 31 reactors, large reactors. 32 a year. On Earth, 32 reactors a year. They better get pretty busy because they're getting behind already. So, like, this is ludicrous to suggest they're going to build 32 reactors a year worldwide. Russia's like out there posturing. They're going to build the reactors here, build them there. Anybody want one? We'll get to you. Put your name in the pot there. We'll get to you. We'll build you one. But it's not going to happen, is it? There's zero possibility they're going to build 32 reactors a year. They're going to have a reactor up and running every 2 weeks worldwide. It's just ludicrous to suggest it, isn't it? Without modernization of its regulatory system, the future of nuclear power is questionable at best. With current regulations preventing innovation and increasing project cost. No, it's not. No, you're trying to protect the population from being exterminated. So the regulations are just the same regulations you got, which are not very good, not very safe regulations in the first place. They want to get rid of all regulations. Okay, let's get rid of all regulations. Let's get rid of them all, because it doesn't matter. They're not gonna build it. They're just making up laws, right? They're like, well, if you let us do whatever we want, build the reactors in everybody's back garden, we can do it. And so if you remove all the regulations, they're still not going to do it. They can't. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the equipment. They don't even have the applications into the regulatory agencies to get approved. Right? So, like, using that excuse that if they had less oversight, they can have a nuclear renaissance, is simply dishonest. Because if you moved all regulations, they still can't do it. They're completely incompetent. They're 100% incompetent. There's zero possibilities. It's zero possibilities they can build the reactors. 2023 was undoubtedly the year of nuclear power. Like, what are you talking about? You had so many reactors went offline permanently last year. It's like one of your worst years in history. In the United States, where regulators approved the nation's first advanced reactor design, a newly built reactor came online for the first time in over 30 years. 30 years. And they're going to build one every 2 weeks now because Constipated Parties, Conference of Parties 28, in Saudi, of all places, United Nations, which is a corporation, it shouldn't even exist, is actually the military-industrial complex, according to Eisenhower and George Bush Sr., right? Let me play that clip for George Bush Sr. Dana's lying. Why didn't he play the clip? He always plays the clip. He's lying to you, folks. He's lying. I mean, there's people say so many awful, just like people, but the industry, right? So many ghost accounts. They say so many awful things about me. They're trying to get me assassinated, right? But I mean, the stuff they're saying about me is horrific. I'm actually a good person, whether people believe it or not. I'm a very honest person. In the nuclear, when you're talking nuclear, if you're not honest, it's going to show up right away, right? You got to be 100% honest because it's such a difficult subject. And I run an educational program, so you can't run an educational program and not be honest, right? That's the idea of an educational program, is you're honest. And it's the only educational program nuclear ever had in its entire legacy. On top of that, there's never been, which is really bizarre, there's never been a show like we're doing here where we just tell the truth. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. We're just honest the whole time. There's never been a show like that before. How does that tell you? So this is George Bush, where he calls United Nations repeatedly the New World Order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
So he's calling the United Nations the New World Order. He's not the only one. They are. They're the New World Order. Under the current non-regulatory commission structure / nuclear regulatory commission, advanced reactor developers must adhere to regulations based on the technology of large light water reactors. It's problematic for several reasons. Advanced reactors differ from their larger counterparts. They're smaller, employ different passive safety features. Oh yeah, and they don't exist. So they have none of those attributes because they don't exist. It's like small modular reactors. The comic books are more real than small modular reactors, let's put it that way. And sometimes run on spent fuel. They don't run on anything. They don't exist. And spent fuel is mixed oxide fuel, which is illegal in Canada and the United States because it's such a hideous, ridiculously lethal emissions coming from these fuel rods. Once they go into the fuel pool, there's no containment. Now, like a typical nuclear reactor cycle, when you take the fuel out, the fuel rods are still splitting atoms into the environment. There's no longer containments in fuel pools, right? But that stuff is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And it's poison for millions of years, long past the human experience. Still, the Commission applies the same broken and inefficient licensing process, often at the expense of innovation and progress. There is no innovation. There is no progress. The engineers could work around it. The engineers are the one that got to deal with it. What's the big deal? Even if you removed all the restrictions, how come you don't show, like if we didn't have it here, look, we can do this, 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 and this, and this, and this. Because it's simply just, it's an excuse, right? That's all. They're just making excuses up for why they can't build their reactors. And they've been doing it now for 30, 40 years with these excuses. You don't have licenses into the Regulatory Commission for small modular reactors. And NuScale was kind of close, but they're still shy a couple of 100,000 pieces of paper. They didn't even try. And they told the investors they were going to build their reactors and give us all your money, and they did. And what happened? They laughed at them, and they're still in business, and the investors are left struggling. Nuclear energy is clean, safe, and reliable. But see, these, they regurgitate these narratives, but they can't quantify it. And the person who wrote the story is no less than scumbag himself. Jeff Luce is a policy analyst at Generation Atomic. He's a policy analyst at Generation Atomic. Who's making small modular reactors. So who's got a lot at stake to pretend that the hindrance is because of policies? No, they can work around it. They got all kinds of other restrictions. Nucleo consults NTS on transport of MOX. This is United Kingdom. And if you're coming from the World Nuclear News, you know it's propaganda, right? They're a despicable lobbying group. The mixed plutonium uranium oxide, mixed oxide fuel. Mixed plutonium uranium oxide, MOX. And wherever MOX go, everything else dies. And again, they give you these stupid curvatures of a reactor that, you know, like there's no reactor going to work with that minimum amount of equipment, right? It's usually 1 million pieces of equipment. But they give you this bizarre depiction that it's very simple and blah, 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 when it's simply not. Nucleo, which is a disgusting UK business. Really, they're disgusting, these people. We've covered them many, many times over the last, say, 5 years, or 4 years when they popped up, or whatever it is. Is planning a 30 megawatt lead-cooled fast neutron test reactor in France. Test reactor. And then with in 2030, give or take a couple of decades, with a 200 megawatt first of its kind commercial unit in 2032. Now, they propose these small modular lead-cooled fast reactors, which are breeder reactors. These are plutonium reactors. And they have no way of decommissioning these reactors. They're like the Mondu reactors. Right, so you can't put a door there afraid that, because you can't let air in there and you can't let water in there because it'll detonate. And that was the problem with the Japanese reactor, right, the Mondu reactor. They built it with no way to decommission it, and it failed horribly. And then they had to run away and leave it sitting there for a few decades. And then when no one's paying attention, they polluted that part of the country. In June 2022, Nucleo announced it had contracted France's Arano for feasibility studies and establishment of a MOX production plant. Of their own MOX production plant, which is a high assay fuel, like a 15% grade, weapons grade fuel. And so the trick is to use this incredible toxic and energetic. And so what they're reclaiming uranium plutonium from fuel. It should never go through a chain reaction again. They don't know what to do with the mixed oxide fuel they're creating right now because it's so hot when you take it out of the reactor. It's split in so many lethal everything is a lethal atom that comes out of these things. They split atoms for millions of years, and there's no containment. So they're put in fuel pools and you boil off water, and each liter is full of these lethal isotopes that are liberated into your communities. And the majority of these sites are surrounded by farms. They build them in prime active farmlands. As part of, and the same thing with nuclear dumps. Andrew Murdoch, Nucleo's managing director in the United Kingdom. And these people are generally the worst humanity can cough up, can spit up, can puke up. So Nucleo's MOX fuel manufacturing facility, which is United Kingdom, which had several mixed oxide fuel sites like the Sellafield and Donerae. I mean, Donerae they expect is going to be at least 315 years before they can manage the site. And what are you building it in France? And the movement of the MOX fuel to the reactors from France, including those in the UK, will need to be managed to the highest standards of safety and security in line with stringent regulations. And the regulations are like, it's a joke. They hate our guts, and there's no one to hold them accountable because they use the Secrecy Act against you. Taiwan's nuclear power phase out uncertain under divided legislators. They have a new president in Taiwan, I believe? And Taiwan has Orchard Island. And Orchard Island is where they put all the natives when a bunch of Chinese moved on to Taiwan, right? And so they took the natives in Taiwan and moved them, because they don't like them, they moved them out to Orchard Island. So after a number of decades of nuclear, they were gathering up a lot of nuclear fuel. And they said to the natives on Orchard Island, said, hey, how about if we build a canning facility for canning salmon and tuna and crab and stuff like that. And the natives were like, wow, we like it. And he said, well, it's not going to cost you nothing. We're gonna pay for everything. And we're going to give everybody in the community a stipend each month, $1,000, $1,200 a month. And you don't got to do nothing. Just let us have our canning factory there. And so the natives signed out the piece of paper, said, yeah, we're in. And so then Taiwan built their nuclear dump there and called it a tuna canning factory. So about a decade later, the natives were like, hey, wait a second. That's not a canning factory. And Taiwan was like, ha, 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 too bad you signed the dotted line. How do you get any worse than that? Like, how do you become that degenerate of a scumbag? Well, if you're in the nuclear industry, that's normal, Dana. I'm using the thermos tonight because usually when I get around to my tea, it's always gone cold on me. And, excuse me. I'm just tired of it. I need that hot tea to cut the throat because I'm trying to tell a story for a couple of hours. And it's so difficult to do these shows. People don't understand how much work goes just to get all this together. And then how difficult it is to sit here and actually tell the story. I used to make this puppet of balloons and paper, and it was like a robot puppet kind of thing. So you had paper arms and balloons, and then the head was this big balloon. I would put eyes on it, nose, and a mouth on it, and then I would keep it under my arm and pound it in the head every time I was angry rather than yelling. And at the end of the show, I would try to tear the head off these puppets. And it used to be pretty funny sometimes. People used to roar. The good old days. Because they would get so frustrated. It was like a way of relieving the frustration. No nuke homeland, uncertain with divided legislators. So there's only one reactor left running in Taiwan, apparently. Taiwan, the previous administration was pro-nuclear. This new administration, I'm not quite sure what they are. Hang on a second, I got to poke myself in the eye a few times. Don't rub your eyes, Dana. Let me see if I can find it. The eye's still a little iffy. Hang on. I guess I can duck out and do it. Where's the fun in that? Where's the fun in that? Where's the fun in that? Look at them. Oh. Woo! We got control of the government. We got all the money. They're so happy. And look at them. They can barely contain themselves. They're going to loot your friggin' pensions now, boy. So Taiwan's nuclear reactors, they got 3 on the north end. They're all closed. Am I right in saying that? And they got this one on the south end. And that's only 6% of the electricity of the entire country. So it's not like the world is going to fall apart if they put another coal plant there, so to speak, right? They're trying to keep that reactor up and running. Now, if you go backwards and you look at, that's their steel cast. And how long do you think that's going to survive if you get one of these guys in Taiwan again? Anybody really think that can hold up to one of these things? Or one of those earthquakes? Or one of these earthquakes in Taiwan? How about this earthquake in Taiwan? How about that earthquake in Taiwan where you just drop skyscrapers? How about that? If you get a fall, the whole island, like this is only some of the pictures. It's just, I've done this before, and some of the pictures are just holy smokes. I mean, but when you look at stuff like this, I mean, that alone is just what the hell happened. How good is those nuclear power plants going to hold up against something like that? if you have that happen in Taiwan, that's goodbye to Taiwan. If that happens to a nuclear power plant, right? And he's an environmental consultant now. So he's got a job, makes big money, can afford fancy basketballs and books. Must be nice. And you got people like me, and nobody out there will use me as an environmental consultant. And I bet you I do a better job than this kid. Taiwan Power Company. The only thing that matters is if you're really, really, really corrupt, then you can be in charge of the government. Capital Power and Ontario provincial government partner to advance nuclear in Alberta. So, like when you read this is nuclear engineering, that's another. Every time you see that purple Nuclear Engineering International, just remember this is a lobbying group for the nuclear industry. They're the furthest thing from honest, and you'll never find their name on a single article. Like World Nuclear News is the same thing. You'll never find the author's name on the articles. Hell, Danny, you even get my telephone number at the beginning of every show. Not that it matters. 709-589-4406. But when you read their article, you're not finding no numbers, no names, no nothing. I don't hide away from them. Oh, sorry. Ontario provincial government building North America's first fleet of small modular reactors as Darling nuclear site in Ontario, except that they're actually not. They don't have an application into the regulatory agency. So, like, this is really straightforward. You got to get an application, like 1 million pieces of paper, into the regulatory agency. They're going to go through it, 300 or 400, 500,000 people, and they're going to get through that, and then they're going to find flaws. They're going to make recommendations. And that's going to take 3, 4, 5 years to get through all of that. So then the OPG is going to have to re-engineer the nuclear power plant with the new recommendations, submit it to the regulatory agencies again. They're going to go through it again. It's another 3, 4, 5 years. And so now they got to build an experimental one somewhere else, not in your communities, but far away, like Chalk River National Laboratory for Canadians, for instance, right? That's basically the only spot they can build experimental reactors. And so that's going to take however long to build. First, they got to have clear out the spot. I'm going to spend $500 million to level out the site, engineer it for a nuclear reactor. Then they're going to build their small modular reactors there. They're going to push the limits in increments over maybe a decade. They're going to find a bunch of flaws into that design. Then they're going to re-engineer it. That's going to go back to the Regulatory Commission. It's going to take 2, 3, 4 years to go through the 1 million pieces of paperwork. Then it's going to come back. They're going to have to build another reactor, make sure that one actually works, and they're going to have to run that for 4 or 5 years, make sure they get the kinks out of that. And if everything goes good now, then they're going to redesign the whole thing again, resubmit the application, and now they can start building the reactors. But why wouldn't, like, these reactors are so small that geothermal makes more sense, because you can produce just as much electricity with geothermal, and you can have it up and running in 12 months instead of 25 years. So why would you use small modular reactors when you can just do geothermal in every community? Because that's what the small modular reactors version was. Oh, we can put one in every community. Yeah, but you can do a geothermal in every community. It's everywhere on the entire planet. In 2022, the government of Alberta, Ontario, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick jointly released a strategic plan for small modular reactor deployment. Yeah, but you released a plan with no small modular reactors, with no designs, with nothing into the regulatory agencies, with no applications. with no design. Like they wrote a memorandum of understanding between the 4 provinces here in Canada without a reactor. So we're not going to look at geothermal or anything else. We're going to wait till you come up with a small modular reactor. But that's not what the ratepayers expect. The ratepayers are paying extra money every month so you can replace the current energy system that they got in a timely manner. Instead of putting everything on hold and wasting it on the despicable nuclear industry, on a pipe dream known as a small modular reactor that doesn't exist anywhere on the entire planet. And then in 2023, Alberta announced $5 million investment in small modular reactors. Like $5 million, the nuclear industry is first off going to steal 90% of whatever the fundings are. That's going to go to administration. But $5 million, you're going to take $500 million just for the land management to engineer the whole site. So $5 million is not a commitment. It's an absolute pathetic. Just a pathetic. You get the picture. Pathetic. Nuclear plant in Estonia would start to pay for itself from year 6. And they're showing you the new scale design. It's equal to a ice cream container cut in half and flipped upside down. And it'll never look like that. Look at this place. There's never going to look anything like that. You're talking about mixed oxide fuel. There's no stacks. There's no nothing. It's ridiculous to suggest it would look like that. North Korea is going to launch a new satellite. Well, they actually did, didn't they? And build drones and boost nuclear arsenal as it warns war is inevitable. Well, North Korea was captured by Japan right up until Nagasaki, Hiroshima for 50 years. So then all of a sudden Nagasaki, Hiroshima, Japan had to surrender, and their horses had to surrender. And so then North Korea fought for their freedom. And South Korea, beat the daylights out of them. The United Nations showed up immediately and napalmed every community, and he dropped more ordnance weapons than the entire World War II used in World War II on just this little North Korea. They bombed it into non-existence. And now it's been locked up for another 70 years. For 120 years, North Korea has been ostracized from humanity. And who's in North America attacking again? Nobody. They're surrounded by United Kingdom American military bases with chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. And they've been ostracized for 120 years. And then, allegedly, they're the boogeyman. They're going to get you if you don't give the weapons manufacturer tons of money to send weapons to South Korea. North Korea is going to get you. If you don't hold drills and posture to the North Koreans constantly, multiple times a year, they're going to get you. You got to give all your money to the military, or North Korea is going to get you. You got any idea how stupid people are that believe that lie? Nuclear power is no silver bullet for net zero targets. Man, whoever wrote that is getting fired. You can't criticize nuclear. You end up like me. Ex-Hong Kong Japanese seafood ban based on data and to show contrasts from China with one country, two systems. Japan's envoy in the city says. Well, the reactors actually melted down. They're refusing to say that the reactors melted down. Now, I'm only showing you typically reactor 3 and reactor 4 because hopefully that's, I don't know anymore, but hopefully reactor 3 and 4 shows you that they're meltdowns. It's unassailable. South Carolina nuclear plant cracked pipes get downgraded. South Carolina nuclear plant's cracked pipes get a downgraded warning from the nuclear officials. It's amazing they gave them any warning at all, isn't it? Oh, it's Dominion Energy. Could still run for 6 hours in emergency. For 6 hours, not enough to get you out of trouble. There's no regulatory. There's the good old boys club, and that's it. And they'll exterminate humanity, the 8 million species, rather than give the nuclear industry a black eye. Jack Spencer, time for nuclear energy. The silver lining of United Nations Constipated Party 28 Global Warming Conference is the growing consensus nuclear energy is critical to meet the nation's carbon dioxide reductions goals. Now they're saying they're going to build 32 reactors a year. A new reactor every 2 weeks somewhere on the planet. It's coming online. It's going to take them 12 years just to get one of them online. And there's no way they're going to be building that many. Nuclear power plant watchdog groups applauds Markey Warren letter. Next era seeks to consolidate emergency response personnel to Seabrook Station, 3 other nuclear plants they own across the country. And that the proposed changes, including reducing many of the on-site staff responsible for mitigating an emergency, forming a single response team for all 4 plants that operate from a remote office in Juno Beach, Florida, which is 1,000 miles away from Seabrook. I couldn't care less about you. They hate your guts. Nuclear fuel plant seeks a tax break for $39 million expansion with new jobs in Richland. Oh, you guessed it. Francis Framatome. He wants a waiver. They all want a waiver. World's first facility for radiation accidents. I thought Fukushima was the world's first facility for radiation accidents. They're not going to wear these friggin' clown outfits at the Fukushima nuclear meltdown, I can tell you that much. Nuclear power, the USA wants to build a different type of reactor. The molten salt reactors were first built in the 50s and haven't been used in the United States since the 70s because they're a disaster. Kiro's Power is leading the project, which is scheduled to be completed by 2027. Don't believe a thing they're telling you, folks. Biden signed a $886 billion defense bill, extending the controversial spying program, of course. Don't ask me what that is doing there because I couldn't tell you. A nuclear plant for electric cars in Greece. Why aren't you going after something sensible? 4 of the most promising energy startups we've covered in 2023. You don't want to know. Oh yeah, humidity, the new source of green energy alongside of solar and wind. Humidity. It'll generate electricity from atmospheric humidity. It engineered a nanomaterial that in basic terms captured airborne water molecules and direct their movements through nanoscale channels, yielding an electrical charge. You know, Nikola Tesla stuff, right? And Integer Technology is the alternative for expensive home energy installations. Renaissance Fusion is on a mission to revolutionize energy production by harnessing the potential of nuclear fusion. They're going to have a 1 gigawatt nuclear fusion reactor by 23 if they got to kill everything on the planet. And they're going to do it with 3D. Oh, that's nice. 2023 is the warmest year on records post Fukushima. The most vicious cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes post Fukushima, all of it. The hottest in at least 125 years. Even if fusion takes generations, the 2 cheapest forms of energies in human history are already on shore, wind and sun. France's EDF looks to raise $100 million to expand smart meter blitz. France. Man. Quest for the holy grail of nuclear fusion has been a long and stupid waste of money. If you took the tens of thousands of scientists that are working on something they can't solve. They're working on a patent from 1904 on top of that. So it's not like they're innovative. If you took them and come up with solutions for geothermal, we wouldn't have to worry about nuclear ever again, would we? And geothermal, you can do it like it is. You don't need to advance it anymore, but the technologies for advancing it are just incredible. For like how to drill deeper, quicker, and much deeper, and get 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, which are hotter than nuclear, hotter than gas, hotter than oil, hotter than coal. And you can take all the gas, nuclear, oil, and coal plants and just replace them with geothermal. Just build a geothermal, switch it on, turn off the gas, oil, and coal. Leave all the other infrastructure there. So plasma must be heated to a temperature of 100 million degrees Celsius. And so they're going to boil water at 100 million degrees Celsius, 300 million degrees Fahrenheit or something. And you say there's no way you can have an accident at those temperatures. Well, first off, you're going to be boiling water, right? So in order to boil the water, you're creating all this energy, all this heat. 100 million degrees Celsius. So like you just can't just stop that. It's 100 million degrees Celsius. So yeah, you can have an accident, an insane one. 180 million degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. Russia says fire had been put out on a nuclear-powered cargo ship. Well, that's nice. Atom Float runs Russia's fleet of nuclear icebreakers. And so the Lenin, the nuclear, one of the first ones, they dumped the reactor core in the Arctic. Along with 18,000 other nuclear dumps they dumped up there. Was it 18,000, yeah? Scientists develop a portable reactor with amazing features, transformative for economy, industries, and communities. And again, this is Da Vinci, right? And so we hear about this over the number of years, but it's just these little blurbs, and they're just basically, these. It's simply never going to look like that. We're almost through this, eh? Here, have some liberty. Let me see. I got a big mess here, do I? We're almost through this, so might as well keep going. Denmark Queen unexpectedly announced abdication in New Year's Eve speech. She stepped down. And this guy is going to replace her, I guess, the Crown Prince Frederick. U.S. military kills Houthi rebels attacking container ships in the Red Sea. How many suicide bombers does it take to equal one of these things, I wonder? 1 million? 2 million? 3 million? 10 million? 10 most intriguing science breakthroughs over the past year. Big advances in fusion. Big scam in fusion. There is no advances in fusion. There's zero advances in nuclear fusion. They have all kinds of propaganda, and that's all we get out of them, right? Just endless, relentless propaganda. Let's finish this here. South Korea staging decapitation drills for possible assassination of Kim Jong-un. Well, like they admit that they use this as a posturing thing, so he's worried about being assassinated. They're never going to do it. It's strictly about fear, right? UK and allies seek to counter China using subs with unlimited nuclear power. UK and their allies are going to counter China. Well, first off, like, what are they doing in the Sea of China, in their territory? That's called, provoking them, right? U.S. will push back on the behavior, says Blinken. South China Sea. Well, that's imagine if China comes over and hangs out in your sea. It's the same thing, right? It's provocative. Dogs use British-made gadgets to find radiation in Ukraine's battlefields. Well, like, how many millions and millions and millions and millions of dirty bombs did UK send down there in the first place? Right? The depleted uranium munitions and the 155 millimeter depleted uranium shells. Inside Emily attacks romance with a handsome nuclear scientist. So you got a pretty girl, nuclear scientist, trying to get the kids to go to school to be nuclear scientists, right? Because nuclear industry, that's the only way you can get you there, is to trick you, manipulate you, and deceive you. And once they get you sucked in, then it's too late to go get another education. You're forced to be a scumbag for the rest of your life. I guess that's it. I do believe we made it right through the show. How did we do? We get through it? What time is it? Oh, crap. A little bit late, a little bit over the benchmark there. Let's close the poll down, I guess. Where's the poll to, Dana? It's coming up. How do we do? Would the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, UN, try to hide another nuclear fuel pool meltdown like they did at Fukushima Reactor 4 and 3? And I showed you pictures of Reactor 4 and 3, right? There's Reactor 4 and 3. They hid the fuel pool meltdowns of those two reactors at Fukushima. And we got an overwhelming yes, they would, Dana. Thank you, everybody that participated. Let's close her down. Port Angeles, Albert, PBS Lover, Sue Sprang, thank you all. Tim, good night, everybody. Have a great night. Oh, Stephen Young is out there. Hugs for Stephen. Port Angeles. Anybody I miss? Blue Jay. Richard. I guess that's it. We'll see everybody. I'll read your comments later. Hugs for everybody. Dana Nasana. James Lucid, I know, is out there. And everybody else. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. I'll see everybody on the other side. Take care, folks.